Well, it's being live streamed. Thank you. So basically, I'm here now that I have been invited by you is one of the process of my life that I think I have to be very grateful. And I think I've gone through so many, like many people, perhaps they call it ups and downs, but I say maybe I just find things that I need to reshape a bit. And but I feel very lucky, very grateful that I had great parents. So they brought me up such a way that I can have my values that I got from them. And this is something that I started my journey in life basically since, well, after I ended my senior high school, then I left home, so I studied abroad. So what happened was that during my stay at home, that is from the time I was born in 1956 and all the way to 1973, I've gone through so many phases of life that had formed me. So basically, my father was an army officer. So when I was 2 years old, I was brought by my mom to North Sulawesi because my father was the commander-in-chief and facing against the Permesta rebellion. So I first experienced the quote unquote the war and when I was 2 years old, and but I forgot everything afterwards. But in 65 things happened again. So I was very lucky because my father was the only deputy in the Indonesian Army headquarters that was not kidnapped. So, you know, in 1965, the chief of army and two of his deputies and some of the generals were kidnapped. But my father was very lucky. He was not kidnapped because apparently they came to the wrong house. So if they came to the right house, I may not see you now. So what happened after that, things changing very rapidly in Indonesia. And he was the last ambassador who was actually, how do I say, he got the Sukarno's letter. So he was the last ambassador who was formally appointed by Sukarno. But when we left, it was the changing of the presidency. So we had to wait in Hong Kong because he was appointed in Manila. And what happened was that he received another letter of credential signed by Suharto. So he was probably the only ambassador who had two credential letters. So that's something that I learned. So after 2.5 years in Manila, I got back. And not long after that, my father was jailed. And so that was, again, another event in my life that made me, made me thinking a lot. But to cut a long story short, in 1974, I left Indonesia and lived in the UK for 11 years. And that's where I learned a lot about life. So that's when I have forgotten my negative life experience previously and everything I wanted to change positively. So I have no, dendam with whoever was treating my father. So, but anyway, to cut a long story short, I got back. Then I was, perhaps before I got back, I received beasiswa, a scholarship. So my last 2 years in the UK, I didn't spend any money. So I studied, and because it was only for 2 years, I didn't do my bachelor. So I had my diploma, got back and worked for the company or the person who gave me the scholarship. So that was the Bakri company. So Abu Rizal Bakri was the man who actually created a really big change in my life. So I worked for Bakri, and in 1999 I moved to Freeport. So for 10 years, and I moved back to Bakri. So I only experienced two companies in my life. And so that is something that I think I'm so very grateful that I had life experience, working experience, and I have so many friends. So this is also my biggest asset in my life, that all my friends I still have since I was in the elementary school up till now. We still connected. So that is again a big blessing in my life that I have so many friends. And not too long ago, I met you, and I have another friend, Dami Hazen. So again, friendship is probably what created my life to be much happier. But that's probably the beginning. So is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you for the good introduction. So, exactly also why I admire you a lot. You are straightforward, no nonsense, disciplined man. Some people will call you very serious because, yeah, in your formality, you can be very serious and demanding. But that's also what I admire about it because everything is pure and honest. How I met you, right? So if you don't like it, you just say it. If you say you agree, you don't agree, and you don't feel ashamed or you don't try to package it to do that. And probably that's because of your army experience with your father. I similar with my grandpa also fought the war here and disciplined me on his way, right? And that's also what I like about you and your experience with the West, where you first you also explained it, thought that was the real world, and then you came back and then you thought, hey, that's not the real world. This is the real world, and I have to do something right now, right? And that's also how we met when you published with your team the book How to Implement ISO 26000 with the author Maria, who you introduced to me. Um, so, Paksidata, what if I listen to your story, right? Uh, what were the most fundamental things that shaped you for being the man now? If you talk about your youth, but also your experience in uh, your career when you were younger.
Well, probably the values that I have learned a lot since I was a child was righteousness and correctness and honesty. I think that's one of the things that I have tried to keep, and and this also then reflects in my way of expressing myself. And I'm glad that I learned about emergenetics. So I know my thinking and behavior preferences. And this creates a lot of the learning from me for when you talk about social preference. I like to be around with people, but at the same time, I also like to express um, my thinking, which may not necessarily be the same thinking as my counterparts or my friends. But at the same time, I try not to hate anybody. So we may have differences, but how can we then try to find ways so that those differences uh, can link to something that unites the two persons? Perhaps a similar goal. So when the goal is the same, so we may have different ways in achieving the goals. So that is something that I learned a lot about psychometric tool called Emergenetics, because I also happen to be the country rep in Indonesia for about 9 years. I only just gave it to my friend only in January. So that is also a tool that helped me. So again, it is all about communication, and that is what shaped me. And I'm also blessed because my 3 decades of experience is very much linked to public relations, which link very strongly to communication. So I think that is something that I can then try to behave myself, despite the fact that I'm very blunt. But how can I then try to respect everyone? But sometimes people may not happy to to listen to what I have to say. So
Not
I think that
everybody have the effort and the interest to take a journey into someone else.
absolutely
So
yes.
that's also why we're here and do it out of the blue. One way we want to put you in the picture and your story, and in the other way, we want to show the audience how we call it in the way of Socrates, verbally following works. So how do you deepen answers without telling stories? And you just said and just mentioned how you sometimes are in situations where you speak up and not everybody agree on that and still try to achieve the mutual goal. So can you give me an example from the past where you did that and the project and it had a positive influence on the project?
Oh, yes, there may be some successful, but also there may be some failures in trying to uh, well help people to understand my goals, and also help people to achieve the same goals. But if we are working in a team, I think that's where it all starts. So if we are a team, we have to start with the planning. So planning obviously have to have the goals. And I think this is where it all starts. But when we are trying to achieve those goals, we may have different ways to achieve those goals. So it's easier when you're in a team. So, but if you're in a family, which is also a team, uh, the goals may not necessarily be written, but
Yeah,
in the company, it is written.
true.
But you have to talk to your wife, and the same goes is that okay? And I'm so lucky that in the process of building my family, I found somebody who actually helped me in fulfilling all the goals that I had. But at the same time, she helped me uh, creating a better process. So that is something that when you talk about company, you talk about financing. So you have to be able to convince your bosses that they can accept the expenses that you are going to use, and also understand the achievement of the activities with the expenses that we are going to spend to help the company. So in a very short uh, sentence, it is all about creating mutual benefits for all. So if everyone thinks that they can achieve or get the similar benefit, it is easier. So this is something that convincing others, it needs to have that similar um, benefits that we have to create together. So just like you with your wife and kids, if everybody gets the similar benefits, and everybody happy. And this is I think that's where it all starts.
Yeah, that's true. And then if you look at that, because you mentioned communication and the importance of that, uh, and also the differences between private and professional life. And if I believe that in family, everybody has his own way of communication. Everybody have to be free because it's a different game. And professionally, we have indeed rules and scriptures. Uh, if you would scale the importance of communication in the professional environment from 1 to 10, and then 10 is the most important, how would you scale it? How important is communication from 1 to 10?
Well, communication for me, having been working in the corporate communications or leading corporate communications, for me it's 10, of course,
Okay.
because I think that's where it all starts. But I just want to add on that, that whether it's a team of family, a team of friendship, a team of cooperation, a team of whatever, it is, again, it's about human being. And every human has all these different preferences. So if we can understand every preferences of every person, it's easier for us to basically understand what that person wants to achieve. So in the way that that person wants to achieve. So that's why I for me, people may look differently whether communication within a company or within family is different. But to me, it's the same because I'm now communicating with my granddaughter, and you just have to be honest. But the most important thing is we do not have, well, we don't have to get angry with everyone. Anger is the emotion of negative emotion. So I think that's where it all starts.
That is true. My background is psychology and behavior and human performance and how to reflect that. And last Monday, when the show went a little bit wrong with Tina, Tina is a woman who brings mind and heart together for executives on a high level. Uh, I know the importance of that. Um, um, the thing is, for example, I'm an analyst in DISC, DISC, and there we categorize people in four behavior groups actually. But we also, one of the most reputed men and acknowledgement, Mr. Greg Barnes, taught me once, Demi, we have these four categories, but even when you break that all down, we still have 8 billion different kind of people. So it's impossible to categorize them. So for people to learn is to have the antennas to see who's in front of you and maybe why the person is like that. And that way you discover together how to find the best way, right? And I know you are very straightforward, so I also can imagine that you had a conflict here and there in the past with certain people who didn't want to accept your way of communication. Can you give me an example of that?
Oh yes, yes. I have experienced many um, shall I say experiences with many people, and as long as it doesn't touch my very basic value, I'm fine if somebody gets angry with me. But when it touches my very basic value, and I will go against that. For instance, if someone says very bad thing personally, then I have to say something that go against that. That I should have made that person learn not to say that.
Mhm.
Or if someone actually said something that I have to do that because of that differences. For instance, if I can't follow my boss, then I have to resign. I will resign. I have no problem with that. So I think since you are a psychologist, and this is something that you mentioned one psychometric tool, but to me, this is where in my 3 decades of experience, um, all the what I all the psychometric tests, quote unquote, because I don't like to say it's a test because a test makes people fail or pass.
No, this is nothing more than an assessment and it gives you a moment in time.
Exactly. But
And
some people,
if they have a fight with their wife yesterday, then probably the test will be different than when they were happy this morning.
exactly. So this it's not a test.
No,
I
it's an
think it's an
assessment.
assessment. It's
True.
an assessment. But where I have not found any organization that actually make use of the assessment results to create better communication. If you talk about DISC, you talk about MBTI, you talk about many other
but that is
tools.
because it's uncharted. To be honest, actually, I'm interviewing you, but I'm going to answer this one. uh, in human research management, where I come from, uh, behavior profiling, character profiling, expectations on behavior on the work floor is integrated in the human resource management system. So there are ways and they're integrated. But yes, I'm now 7 years in Indonesia, and somehow the people here still takut from that. The idea that they are measured by something that they cannot control is scary for many people that I met. Other way, they are eager to have that information. So one way they want it because they want to be more able, because that's exactly what my job is, and it's for my really hard to find good assignments, because people not really understand the whole thing, because it's not in a method, it's not measurable. You hire a person who has a good people's knowledge, and that person is capable to shape a team where people can work together, align with each other, and knows also how to use the contradictions. When we have someone really dominant and someone really introvert, how can you balance those people together and still become successful? And normally they walk over each other or surrender, but there's also a way in the middle and one professional way. That is in Indonesia still uncharted, unfortunately, but it should go. And that's also where I wanted to go with you, because you focus always on the adults. I met you with Kadin. I know you are a strong communicator and you're very straightforward in your opinions. And then suddenly, 1.5 years ago, something like that, you said to me, Demi, I'm going to focus on the children because it's so much more important. Can you explain me why you made that decision?
Well, thank you for asking that. And I think because what happened was that I found that I cannot change the persons who have grown up, but we can always give a better, stronger ground for our future generations, so they can understand. If we can talk to them, and this is why I'm so honored that I have been asked to join the Prestasi Junior Indonesia, that we are actually trying to help kids in financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and also work readiness. So what happened is that I see that the world is facing a very difficult situation where gap is actually getting bigger. Gap between those people who know, those people who don't, those people who have, those people who don't. So the social and economic gap is getting bigger. And also, I try every day, you talk about Indonesia, you talk about culture. Culture starts from individual or group behavior and accepted by others. So there are so many different cultures in different regions. And this is something that we don't know. And this is why when I link myself with the so-called psychometric, I don't want to use the word that judge people. And you mentioned just now, dominance, introvert, perhaps there's extrovert. And that is something that I have learned not to use, that people are not judged because they prefer not to talk. That's it. So it doesn't mean that that person is introvert. No, he can or she can be extrovert when that person is comfortable in talking with others. So this is something that, like you said, it's too strict. It's difficult for people.
Oh, that's exactly where I go. I think the experience that you have to work with the youth is my experience that I made 16 years ago. I used to be a career tiger and go all the way up, and then one day I decided to help the people of the street, the jobless people, the social inactive, and teach them how to rediscover their core values, and that was also the time that I threw away all those kind of assessments and all those kind of tests that judge people, because I learned that everybody chooses who they want to do. I also use in my line in my classes when I do real coaching or mindset changing, then I always say that we are the creators, meaning we can create anything we want within our mindset. And if we don't know yet, and if it's not uncharted, then we need to work on changing the mindset. And with coaching, and even adults with trauma, adults is very simple to say it really my way. You have to throw them against the wall, then they will hurt and they will always remember. That's how you change adults. But the problem is sometimes you do that with people with a higher rank, and then it's your you have a problem for yourself, right? And that's not beneficial
Right.
for your career. So if you look at that, Indonesia is emerging, and the gap is indeed how do you call that, increasing. Most of the things is because the technology gap between Indonesia and the rest of the world is really big at the moment already, and Indonesia has tried to do in a very short time what the other countries did in a decade or 2 decades, and Indonesia wants to do it in 5 years, and that reflects to the people. The people want, but the people don't know how. How does your Yaya-san, when you work, how do they work on the how?
Well, there's so many ways on the how. Obviously, when you talk about Indonesia, and this is why I am a strong believer and strong supporter of sustainable development goals, because when you talk about a country, it has been done in the past that the government is the one who are responsible in creating everything. And with SDGs, I think this is something that we all are part of that sustainability. So I have also tried to bring in the values of SDGs into my yayasan. So now the bigger the global understands the needs of SDGs to be achieved by everyone in the world. So basically, when you talk about no poverty, what does that mean? Because everything gets back to the so-called database. And that is where we are trying to find ways in creating better database. So what we are trying to do is to actually create quality education. So quality education is actually goal number 4. So this is something that we all are part of, uh, uh, how do I say, a part of a movement towards achieving that. So there's so many ways to make people understand, but there is only one way that we can say that the government and everybody within the country has to understand what we are trying to achieve. When we are talking about poverty, you're talking about not only the stomach, but also the mindset.
Yeah.
So what happened is that I'm very sad to say this, but the fact is that corruption has grown so much and so wide in my country. And this is something that I really want to bash. I really want to get rid of. And this is something that starts deep inside in the mindset of the people. And you mentioned about, high ranking, and I'm egalitarian. I hate feudalism. So this is why I don't like to be called Bapa, because Bapa
Yeah, you
is
told me that.
father. I'm not a father. And again, since you're a Dutch person, your background is Dutch. So this is something that we haven't even finished our grievances with Netherlands. You know, only a couple of weeks ago, there was, now the Dutch are accepting independence. See, so that is something that history in Indonesia is so very bad because some people had no guts to say the fact.
Well, if you
Because,
go there, that I want to say that on that one, because I'm raised as an Indonesian in Belanda, so that means my grandparents teach me Indonesian values, culture, history, also what really happened, not what everybody told me. Certain people think that the person who made the independence was the hero, but actually was the one that sold the soul, right? Economically wise, right? So and also kicked my grandparents out because they helped the Dutch. Um, what I saw in Indonesia the first and still today pity a lot is Indonesia is looking up to so much countries. The West is so good and so great, and they forget about their own country and who they are and who they were, and magic word, who they were. And because yes, the Abrahamic religions are very important for you for how to live, to make your values. Some people need that. As a military education taught me was, also with SDGs, we learn how to clean our plate, clean up our mess, and be gentle and good for other people. And if you do that, then you already live with integrated SDGs in your life. So you don't need to develop, you just need to do. But that's not for everyone. I also understand that. Um, but Indonesia should learn. I wrote an article about this once. Indonesia should learn to become really independent. What do I mean by that? Financially independent. If you look at the USA, 300 million people, they are the biggest power in the world. The difference between Indonesia and USA is we have all the resources, meaning Indonesia can embark to one of the biggest economies and developed countries in the world, just if they do, and if they are also willing to find their own identity. Be proud to be an Indonesian. Don't think that Amsterdam or Sydney is better than Jakarta. It's not true. Because those cities, if you blow them up, they have bigger problems than Jakarta. If you go to sales, and then for you, because I meet you this way, right? I know you have I actually know your opinion about that. For you, um, SDGs is a way of behavior. It's not really implemented, and it's not from the United Nations. It's a universal property of all the people in the world, and that should be followed. Because United Nations will push a renewable energy, but as you mentioned, people that have hunger and poverty, they really don't care about the solar panel in the kampung. They want food and job. How do you see
well,
this? Because you
this is
are around as
again.
well.
Well, first of all, I think you have to understand that when we started Indonesia, there's no such thing as Indonesia before because we only
Yeah.
have East Indies here, right? So what happened was that when we had Indonesia, my biggest and strongest uh, reason is that we have this word or words so-called Bhinneka Tunggal Ika.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why when you talk about Holland, how many different races or ethnic groups that you have in the Netherlands as a country, without considering those people who came in. But when you talk about Indonesia, you have so many islands. You have three time differences, time zones. And when you talk about the US, they have different history. But our history in Indonesia, like you said, we have to understand the past conflict, but we have to then not to create future conflict. So when you talk about the VOC, it was a company. So when you talk about the dominance of the Dutch in Indonesia, it's when the government came here. When VOC was here, it was not the government. So it was not East Indies, right?
Yeah,
So,
true.
so East Indies was created by the Dutch government. But
Yes.
we didn't have Indonesia because we have Java, we have Lampung, we have Aceh, we have all the regions. And this is why I think the hardest part is to actually unite all these differences because we have different languages, different cultures, even different skin, different religions. And religion has been a very strong tool that has been used by some people to be able to get their power.
Yeah, to
And this is
unite them.
what, yes, this is why, as a Muslim, I am not too comfortable with the way they are treating the mosque with the loudspeaker and so forth. But it's not I'm against Islam, but I'm against the people who do not understand that. So again, coming back to that question, how can we then create that common respect with others? And we have to start with Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. So when
Agree?
Bhinneka Tunggal Ika is, we have Pancasila, but people misunderstand the first sila as being religion. The only one God means that it's more spirituality rather than religiosity. So again, it's not easy. So back to the uh, what we are trying to find out is how can we give a stronger base for kids to understand how they can stand on their own 2 feet.
Yes.
I think that is the main goal that I have to help the future generation at the same time have mutual respect between themselves or between others.
But to be honest, I'm from, you are from the UK. UK is also very open-minded to different religions, right? The Netherlands pretend to be. They actually are not. They are really Christian and Catholic, and they judge everything. But we experience a lot of Arabic people from that following the Islam. And Indonesia, what surprised me was um, Indonesia is the only country in the world who received one of the Abrahamic religions by peace. In Europe and the Middle East, Christianity, Catholic, and Islam, all three of them were brought in by terror. Also, when the VOC came here, they brought it in by terror. They tortured the Indonesian locals to collaborate or else. And Islam came with the traders. And I understand that many people became Islam because it was the only one that for the people here became peace. But like I said, I have many Muslim friends, Muslim in all kinds of religion. In my opinion, Muslim is the Arab word for root believer in God, follower of God, and not necessarily a religion. But all the Islamic people here, they actually created their own religion. It had nothing to do with the Islam that we know and that is pushed in the Middle East. And it's a combination of culture and Islam, and that evolved in more than 1,000 years here. And uh, uh, that's actually what I admire because it's so peaceful and generous from the culture. And you hear the West talk about Indonesia as radicalizing and blah blah blah. Well, I've been working with the most radical groups here to help people in the kampong. They're not radical; they're fanatic. Something different, total different thing. Radical for me is someone who wants to admit violence. And yes, there's corruption, but it's in every sector and not necessarily religion. It's, everybody can be corrupt. But the main people that I meet in the kampong, in the desa, these people are all focused on improving their lives and uniting together to work hard. And I never seen anyone that was really radical, even when he was fanatic. Sometimes they're blunt. That doesn't make them radical, right? And if I see how Indonesia protect the social safety security, then Indonesia also do not allow that from the bottom up. And if you look at because I also know you do a lot for the children, so I've been to a lot of desa, especially on the main islands, Java, Sumatra, Kalimantan, Sulawesi. But uh, what does your yayasan do for the other children? Because some children in certain areas they really have nothing in our definition of society, but have everything in their definition. How do you handle that?
This is something that is not easy because when you talk about creating a movement, again, like I mentioned before, the benefit that one gets from that is what? So if the yayasan that we created is actually started as the junior achievement in the US, and it has been there in the US for over a century. So it's 103 or 104 years old. We have only been doing this for 2 decades in Indonesia. And like you mentioned, you have only been to the main islands.
Yeah.
And to be able to reach so wide, again, you have to have resources. What are the resources that we need? We have to have people to do it. We have to have financial to help us do it. We have to have many other resources so that all what we have planned can be done perfectly or close to perfect. But again, how can we then spread the knowledge? So what we have been doing is to actually create partnership with the government so that we are working closely with the Ministry for Education and Culture so that we can be part of putting in extra curriculum into the studies of kids in the elementary school everywhere in Indonesia. But at the same time, to help people in schools, we are also embracing companies so they can become our partners, to become our donor partner. So they're the ones who can choose which area they want to go in because they're the one who wants to go in, right? We can help with that with all the materials. So what we have is actually creating all these partnerships. And this is what SDGs is all about. Creating partnership so that we are not only working on our own. So I probably need to give you some enlightenment on SDGs because I think this is something that most people look at it as only on the skin side. But if you go into each of the goals, it is not easy. Like you said, the family, the waste that we throw every day, it starts from home. So everything starts from the mindset of a person. And this can only be done through education. Why can the Japanese create such a character which is different to the European, different to the American? But at the same time, they have so many youth who actually went for suicidal activities. So suicide is quite big, quite high. So it's in Korea. But if we only look at the negative side, we can't get the positive side. So what we are trying to do is to create what are the positive sides of every aspect that we can create with our partnership with every single organization. So we are not only creating partnership with companies, but also with international organizations like USAID or even UN. So these are the things that how can we then embrace a lot of organizations? So we don't walk on our own. So we have friends close by to help us reach that goal.
And then Siddharta, about you in this picture. If you were to say where you want to go now and you can change things to make your goal possible where you are now, what would you do? It doesn't matter if there's resistance, but just if you could create something right now to make your work for the Yayasan better, what would you change?
Well, I think I cannot change anything apart from myself. Because if I can change...
for the goal of the Yayasan.
Okay, when you talk about Yayasan, when you talk about when in Yayasan, for instance, my goal is my Yayasan had reached a lot of things for the past 2 decades, but we need like any other yayasan in Indonesia, you have to have a strong formal and legal basis. So we have to obey the rules and regulations that we have. So these are not an easy thing. And again, when you talk about these things, you are trying to create a partnership with the government. Because when you talk about the legal ministry, you have to talk about, okay, how do we go about in creating the boards in yayasan who are, so we need to know the formalities, we need to know the legality, but at the same time, we also have to find ways so that our objectives and goals can be reached accordingly. But we have reached so many goals because up till now, there are so many schools. I just keep forgetting the numbers of students that we have reached because they keep increasing every year. So the next step is not only just give, but see what we have given has produced anything in the future. So we are creating this alumni form so that all these students who have been receiving the benefit, how are they doing now? Are they using the tools that we have given them? So we need to continuously monitor because it's not just a one-off thing that okay, Danny, so this is your assessment, and that's it. And then
No. That is the word. An assessment should be a starting point, not an end point.
Exactly. But again, it's like everything. It has to be continuously be reminded to ourselves and those people so that they know. Because when you talk about entrepreneurship, for instance, in SMR, we are actually helping people or students in SMR creating their companies. And they then have a competition between themselves within the region, in Indonesia, and in Asia Pacific. So I am so happy now to say that only last month in New Delhi, or even this month, 3 weeks ago, we have won the Asia Pacific regional company from one school in Indonesia. So Indonesia has won that. So this is something that it helps to also create students that they're proud to be that. Okay, I won this with against schools from India, from China, from you name it. And this is something that we are not living now solely in one small piece. We are living in a global world, so that we have to be able to understand, like you mentioned in the beginning, that when you talk about technology, I have to say that Indonesia is quite strong in trying to grasp the new technology. We just launched our satellite only this month, right?
2 days ago.
So yeah. So we have those things, but again, how can we then accept all the improvements, not just looking at one person or two persons, and when we hate them, we will say they're not doing anything. But when we like them, even if they're not doing anything, we say, oh, they have achieved so many goals.
Yeah.
So again, these are the things that I want to change. How do I change that? It's not about a person. It's about a system. It's about the similar goal. So Demi for me is a friend. That's it. But if you've done something bad, I will say something that it is bad for you. But we're still friends.
Yeah.
So whatever that comes up in my yayasan is that I want to do it in regards to, I'm a great believer in ISO 26000.
Yeah, I know that.
So when you talk about ISO 26000, you talk about social responsibility. And this is why I'm trying hard now, when you talk about human rights, it has to be covered with human responsibility, because everybody is claiming their rights, but nobody wants to do their responsibility.
True.
So I think that's something that I want to tell the kids, that be responsible.
Yeah, that's one thing I remembered from our meetings also. You always said to me, Damien, I'm not happy with the word CSR because this corporate responsibility have nothing to do with the goal.
Well, it's not the fact that I'm not happy with CSR, but the misunderstanding about CSR is
Explain
that
it.
corporate social responsibility is understood by funding by corporation. No, it's about understanding the impact that any organization do or does.
Yeah, not only give, but also monitor and measure.
I'm understanding the impact, but giving is something else. And this is why we are teaching kids in financial literacy, is that when you receive money, how do you go about it? Is it only for expenses, or is it for saving, or is it for donation? So we are putting everything into one box, that when they have money, they know that they have not only to spend it, but to also save it, and at the end, donate it.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you make effect. Okay, Siddharta, we are closing almost. I have one more question for you. What would you like to say to people that are maybe going to watch this?
Well, I just want to say, please come together, do whatever you like, but please be responsible. That's it. Because responsibility is something that I really want to bring up now, because I'm trying to talk closely with our foreign ministry. So be responsible. Don't just ask for your right, but be responsible for whatever you can do. Thank you, Damien.
Thank you very much also. So we're going to end the show. I'm not going to say goodbye yet. We're going to end the YouTube live for now. And I just want to say thank you very much for your precious time on a Saturday. And for the viewers, next one is on Tuesday from 7 to 8 with Pak Deriwanta from the Kementerian Keuangan in Blue Governance Finance. So thank you very much for now, Siddharta, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Damien.